I sat with my hands flat on the table, not folded, not fidgeting. My lawyer had advised stillness. The courtroom smelled like old wood and the faint chemical undertone of industrial cleaner. Judge Hartley had the kind of face that revealed nothing, decades of neutrality etched into the lines around her mouth. Across from me, Jennifer took the stand. She wore a blue dress I'd never seen before, the kind designed to suggest vulnerability without appearing calculated. Her hair was pulled back carefully, professionally. She prepared for this moment with the same precision she'd applied to everything else in her life, which was to say, she prepared to deceive. I was terrified, she was saying now, her voice steady and measured. He controlled our finances completely. I had no access to our accounts, no agency in any decisions. It was a clean lie. We'd had a joint account for 15 years. I'd never once denied her access to money. The bank statements would prove it, but she delivered the words as if they were memory, not invention. That was her gift, the ability to reshape the past and inhabit it so completely that doubt bloomed in everyone around her. Her attorney nodded slowly, playing the part of sympathetic listener. He was competent, which made it worse. He wasn't putting on an act. He believed her, or he convinced himself to. Either way, the effect was the same. I kept my eyes on the judge, not on Jennifer. Looking at her would communicate something I didn't want to communicate. Anger, hurt, disbelief. All the things she wanted me to feel. My lawyer sat beside me, a woman named Catherine who'd been through 3 divorces of her own and had learned to trust evidence more than emotion. She took a note, just one word. I didn't look. And when he learned you were planning to leave, her lawyer continued, "What happened?" He became aggressive. Jennifer said, "Not physically, but he made it clear there would be consequences. He said I'd never see our daughter on my terms." Another twist of something true into something false. I had said I wanted shared custody. That wasn't a threat. That was mathematics, 2 parents, 2 homes, equal time. But mathematics doesn't translate well into courtroom drama. The doors at the back of the courtroom were closed, but I knew who was waiting in the hallway. Catherine had mentioned an hour ago, casual as weather, Jennifer's mother was here. She called the court clerk this morning, requesting to testify. Neither Jennifer's attorney nor Jennifer herself seemed to know. There was a tension in Catherine's shoulders that suggested she understood the significance of that absence of knowledge. I'd never discussed the details of what her mother knew. I'd never asked. That would have been strategic. And I'd learned long ago that strategy in this situation meant restraint. Let her keep lying. Let her add detail to detail, lie to lie, until the structure became so elaborate that a single thread, pulled at the right moment, would unravel everything. The judge made a note of her own. Jennifer continued speaking, and I waited, my hands still flat, my breathing still even. The truth would have its day. It just wasn't today. It started small. So small I almost missed it. We were in the kitchen of our house on Ashwood Street, the one with the bay window she'd always wanted. She was talking about a conversation with her sister, and in the middle of the story, she changed it, not drastically. Just shifted the facts the way you might adjust the color in a photograph. Her sister had said something supportive. In her retelling, it became critical. A detail that should have made me look good made me look unreliable instead. I remember pointing it out. I remember her face, not angry but disappointed, as if I'd failed some small test of loyalty by questioning her version. "That's not how it happened," I said. "It is," she said. And then, softer, "You just don't remember things the way they actually were." I let it go. I shouldn't have. Over months, these small revisions accumulated like sediment. She began narrating our shared experiences in ways that systematically cut me out of agency, competence, or kindness. I'd made a decision about our daughter's school, and suddenly I'd made it without consulting her. We'd agreed together, but the agreement had vanished from her account. I'd suggested a vacation. It became a trip I'd insisted on. The negation was so subtle it took time to recognize the pattern, that she was building a version of me, brick by brick, that didn't exist. Her mother visited that fall. I remember her sitting in our living room, watching Jennifer talk about how exhausting it was to manage our finances while I sat uninvolved in family decisions. The older woman's face grew tight. She caught my eye for just a moment, a flicker of recognition, maybe apology. She knew her daughter was lying. That night, I heard them in the kitchen. Jennifer's mother's voice was low, urgent. You need to stop this. Whatever you're doing, it's not fair to him. Jennifer's response was swift and cold. He doesn't understand what I need. He never has. This is the only language he understands. Her mother didn't push back. She left the next morning without saying goodbye to me. The gaslighting intensified after that. Jennifer began documenting things, writing down dates, conversations, incidents that had never happened. I'd see her at the kitchen table late at night, typing into her phone. When I asked what she was doing, she smiled and closed the screen. Just protecting myself, she said. Then came the falsified email. I discovered it by accident, 6 months later, when I accessed our old shared drive looking for tax documents. An email thread dated from 2 years prior. Conversations between us that never occurred. In them, I'd supposedly made financial threats. I'd supposedly told her I'd destroy her if she tried to leave. The language was wooden, clearly fabricated, but it was time-stamped, stored in the cloud, real enough to cause damage. I felt something drop inside my chest. Not anger, worse than that. Recognition. This wasn't passion or even jealousy anymore. This was calculated, premeditated. She'd been building a case against me the way a prosecutor builds a case against a defendant. Every small lie, every revised narrative, every fabricated document. It was all infrastructure for something larger. I called my lawyer that night. Catherine listened without interrupting, then said quietly, "She's preparing for war. Don't respond emotionally. Respond with evidence." I printed everything, saved every file, secured every backup. I became methodical in a way I'd never been before. And I waited. I let her keep talking, keep lying, keep adding to her impossible structure of false accusations. The more she built, the more there would be to collapse. I began to understand that silence wasn't surrender. Silence was a weapon. The separation papers came on a Tuesday. I signed them without reading twice. There was no point arguing over the terms. Not yet. Catherine had advised me to give Jennifer what she wanted in the beginning. Let her feel like she was winning. Let her overextend. I moved to a rental apartment on the north side of the city. 2 bedrooms, industrial carpet, a kitchen that faced a brick wall. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbors' conversations through the plaster. It didn't matter. I needed distance more than comfort. Jennifer sent emails about custody schedules. I responded promptly, professionally. She tried to provoke me once, a message suggesting I'd abandoned our daughter, that the court would see my absence as abandonment. I didn't take the bait. I simply confirmed our agreed visitation dates and copied Catherine on the thread. Jennifer didn't try again after that. What surprised me was how quiet the anger became. I'd expected it to burn, to drive me towards some explosive confrontation. Instead, it calcified into something colder and more useful clarity. Every emotion I felt I examined, every impulse to respond, I measured against the evidence I was building. This discipline felt like the only honest thing left of me. Her mother called me in February. I almost didn't answer. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said without preamble. "But I needed to hear your voice." "Okay," I said. "She's lying about you. You know that, right?" "I know that she's lying." There was a tremor in her voice. Guilt, regret, something older than both. "I know," I said. "I've tried to talk to her multiple times, but she won't listen to me. She says I don't understand what it was like being married to you. What was it like?" I asked. A long pause. "Normal. It was normal. You were a good husband. You made mistakes, but you weren't cruel. You didn't control her. You did the opposite. You tried to give her freedom, and she hated you for it because she couldn't use it against you the way she wanted. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that would help either of us. When this goes to court, her mother continued, I'm going to tell the truth. I don't know when. I don't know how yet. But I can't let her do this. You don't have to, I said carefully. You're not responsible for what she's chosen to do. I know, but I'm her mother. And I'm also, she stopped, I'm also a person who knows right from wrong. After she hung up, I sat in that apartment with its thin walls and its view of brick, and I understood something. I hadn't been waiting for Jennifer to destroy herself. I'd been waiting for the people who loved her to stop protecting her lies. The weeks after that phone call were strange. Jennifer sent more emails, more accusations, more fabricated timelines. But the tone had changed slightly. She was building now with urgency, as if she sensed something was shifting. She added new details to old stories. She sent lengthy letters about my pattern of emotional abuse. Each one was a thread I filed away, each one another brick in the structure that would eventually collapse. I attended visitations with our daughter on schedule. I was present and engaged, never bitter, never distant. Jennifer watched from the doorway sometimes, searching my face for some sign of damage she could amplify. I made sure she found nothing. Catherine and I met at the same diner every 2 weeks. We reviewed documents in a booth near the window. The waitress started recognizing us, bringing coffee without asking. Catherine would slide printouts across a laminated table, and we'd discuss procedure in quiet voices. These meetings were the opposite of the chaos Jennifer was orchestrating. They were proof that order and patience were their own kind of power. Your ex-wife's getting nervous, Catherine said one afternoon in late March. Her attorney filed 3 motions this week, all frivolous, all designed to delay or provoke. She's lying faster, I said. Exactly, which means she's running out of rope. Catherine stirred her coffee. And her mother's ready to testify? Yes. Then we wait. We let Jennifer keep talking, keep fabricating, keep building higher. And when the time comes, one person tells the truth, and the whole structure comes down. I nodded. I'd learned what it meant to retreat, not to disappear, but to become unavailable for the fight Jennifer wanted. To be so methodically, stubbornly calm that her chaos had nothing to attach to. To wait with the patience of someone who understood that vindication wasn't something you seized. It was something you allowed to arrive in its own time on the strength of evidence and truth. The real power I discovered wasn't in the courtroom at all. It was in the years before. In every moment I chose restraint over reaction, documentation over drama, silence over the 1,000 small satisfactions of telling her exactly what I thought of her lies. April brought the first real test. Jennifer's attorney filed for an expedited hearing, claiming urgency due to ongoing emotional distress and unsafe conditions in the current custody arrangement. The claims were baseless. Our daughter was thriving. The school reported no behavioral changes, but the filing forced our hand. Catherine and I began preparing in earnest. We went through every email, every timestamp, every fabricated document. I printed statements from the bank verifying joint account access dating back years. I gathered teacher reports, medical records, photographs from school events where I was present and engaged. I collected anything that contradicted Jennifer's narrative of an absent, controlling father. But documentation alone wasn't enough. We needed witnesses, people who could testify to what Jennifer had actually done, what our marriage had actually been. I reached out carefully to people who'd been neutral, mutual friends who'd seen us together, colleagues who understood my character. Most were reluctant. Divorce was messy. They didn't want to pick sides. But I didn't ask them to pick sides. I asked them to tell the truth as they'd observed it. Several agreed. My former business partner, Tom, sat across from me one evening in a coffee shop. He'd known Jennifer for 12 years. She's a different person now, he said, stirring his cappuccino. I don't recognize her. But back then, she was ambitious. She wanted things. And when she couldn't get them the way she wanted, she started rewriting the story. Will you testify to that? I asked. He nodded slowly. I don't want to, but yes. The preparation was meticulous. Catherine walked me through every scenario. What questions might be asked, how to answer without defensiveness, how to present facts as facts rather than grievances. She was teaching me that testimony wasn't about persuasion. It was about consistency. The truth had a quiet authority that didn't require elaboration. Jennifer, meanwhile, was doing the opposite. Each week brought new allegations, each one more elaborate than the last. She now claimed I'd withheld child support. Bank records would show automatic transfers. She alleged I'd missed visitations. I had documentation of every single one. She suggested I was alienating our daughter from her. Our daughter called me on weekends asking when she could see me next. What Jennifer didn't understand was that she was doing my work for me. Every new lie she added to her testimony became another thread to pull. Every fabrication was another contradiction to highlight. She was building a fortress of deception so complex that a single piece of truth would make the whole thing crumble. Catherine and I met more frequently as the hearing date approached. Late nights at the diner, the waitress bringing coffee without asking, bringing it in larger cups now. We reviewed Catherine's strategy for cross-examination. We went through my testimony line by line, not because I needed to memorize anything, but because truth didn't require memorization. It only required clarity. The key, Catherine said one night in May, is that you don't get angry. No matter what she says about you, no matter how vicious her allegations, you stay calm. You stay present. You let the contrast do the work. The contrast between what? I asked. Between her reactive, emotional, escalating, and you, methodical, consistent, unbending. The judge will notice. I also began doing something I'd been avoiding. I started going through Jennifer's own words, her emails, her messages, her recorded statements. I wasn't looking for ammunition. I was mapping the architecture of her deception, finding the contradictions within it. A claim she'd made in January that contradicted something she said in March. A timeline that didn't match another timeline. Small inconsistencies that individually meant little. Together, they suggested a pattern of fabrication. What I found most striking was the precision of her lies. She wasn't making things up randomly. She was constructing a narrative with internal logic, the way someone would if they'd rehearsed it. She'd anticipated what I might say in defense and preemptively contradicted it. She'd built her false version of events not out of confusion or memory distortion, but out of deliberate strategy. That was when I understood she wasn't a victim of her own deception. She was its architect, and architects, when their structures are sound, believe they're impenetrable. By June, the week before the hearing, I felt something settle in me. Not confidence exactly, more like readiness. I'd done the work. I'd gathered the evidence. I'd prepared myself mentally for what was coming. And Catherine had told me something that stuck. We don't have to prove you're innocent. We just have to let the truth speak louder than our lies. The night before court, I sat in my apartment and didn't review anything. I didn't think about strategy. I simply existed in the quiet, waiting for the moment when silence would finally become testimony. The courtroom was fuller this time. Word had spread among the small community of court regulars. Divorce proceedings that had become complicated enough to draw observers. Judge Hartley sat elevated, her expression unchanged, as if she'd seen this particular tragedy enacted 1,000 times before and expected nothing different now. Jennifer testified first, as the accused party. She'd refined her performance since the last hearing. Her voice was steadier, her story more detailed, more layered with emotional specificity. She spoke about nights she'd spent crying, afraid of me, about how I'd gaslit her into believing she was unstable, about the financial control The emotional manipulation, the way I'd try to isolate her from her own mother. It was a masterpiece of construction, each element supporting the next, creating an architecture of victimhood that seemed impenetrable. Catherine cross-examined her with surgical precision, not attacking, not accusatory, simply asking for clarification. When was this conversation? Who witnessed it? Did she have documentation? Jennifer's certainty began to fracture under the weight of specific, unanswerable questions. She contradicted herself twice, once about a date, once about who'd been present. Small contradictions, but they registered with the judge. I saw Hartley make a note. Then came Tom's testimony. He spoke about our marriage with the kind of honest clarity that only comes from someone who has nothing to gain. He described Jennifer as intelligent, ambitious, and increasingly bitter when circumstances didn't align with her expectations. He testified that I'd never been controlling, that if anything, I'd given her too much autonomy. He confirmed that I'd been involved and present as a father. Jennifer's attorney tried to undermine him, suggesting bias, suggesting he didn't really know what happened behind closed doors. Tom simply shook his head. I knew them both. I saw how he treated her, and I see how she's treating him now. They're not the same thing. The bank officer testified next, with documents in hand. Joint account access, automatic transfers, financial transparency. The timeline was damning for Jennifer's claims. Every allegation of financial control was contradicted by the evidence of actual practice. But we all knew the pivotal moment was coming. Jennifer's mother was called to the stand. She moved slowly, as if each step required deliberation. She was sworn in with the same formal precision as everyone else. Jennifer's attorney began the questioning, expecting her to buttress his client's claims. Instead, Jennifer's mother looked directly at the judge and requested to make a statement before answering questions. Judge Hartley nodded, allowing it. I've been afraid to speak for a long time, the older woman began, her voice unsteady. I've been afraid because this is my daughter and I love her, but I love the truth more. What followed was methodical dismantling of Jennifer's narrative. She testified about the falsified documents. She'd seen Jennifer creating them on her laptop, had watched her backdating emails, fabricating conversations. She described being pressured to corroborate stories she knew were untrue. She spoke about the emotional manipulation I'd witnessed, but from a different vantage point, a mother watching her daughter weaponize victimhood as a strategy. I didn't want to believe it, she said, her voice breaking slightly. But watching her do this to him, watching her lie under oath, I realized I couldn't protect her from the consequences of her own choices, and I couldn't live with being complicit in a lie. Jennifer's attorney objected repeatedly. The judge overruled each objection. There was something in Hartley's demeanor that had shifted, a hardness that hadn't been there before. She was seeing the picture now, and it was clear. Jennifer's mother continued, describing specific incidents, fabricated arguments, rewritten histories, deliberate distortions. She testified about conversations where Jennifer had explicitly stated her strategy. I need to make him look bad, so the court will give me what I want. The courtroom was silent, not the silence of calm procedure, but the silence of something fundamental shifting. Jennifer sat motionless, her face draining of color as her own mother systematically dismantled the narrative she constructed. When it was my turn to testify, I did what Catherine had taught me. I answered each question directly. I didn't elaborate beyond what was asked. I presented facts without editorializing. When Jennifer's attorney tried to bait me into defensiveness, I simply restated what the evidence showed. The closing arguments were brief. The judge had already decided. She spoke about the importance of honesty in custody proceedings, about how children deserve to be protected from parental manipulation. She referenced the testimony, noting the corroboration from multiple sources, the documentary evidence, the consistency of my account against the inconsistencies in Jennifer's claims. The court finds, she said, her voice level and final, that the allegations against the respondent are not supported by credible evidence and appear to have been deliberately fabricated. Custody will be modified to reflect equal access, with the respondent retaining full parental rights. The gavel came down. I didn't look at Jennifer. I didn't look at her attorney. I looked at her mother and nodded once, slowly, in gratitude and recognition. She'd chosen the harder path. She'd sacrificed her relationship with her daughter to tell the truth. In that moment, sitting in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and the faint chemical scent of institutional cleaner, I understood that justice wasn't really about winning. It was about bearing witness to the truth, no matter how much it cost. Jennifer's face had gone pale. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. The realization was settling into her that her architecture of lies, so carefully constructed, so deliberately detailed, had collapsed not because I fought harder, but because someone she loved had finally chosen honesty over loyalty. Catherine closed her briefcase with a quiet click. She didn't congratulate me. We both understood that what had just happened wasn't victory. It was exposure. It was a moment when deception, however skillfully built, met an immovable object, the truth. I'm sitting on the porch of a house I didn't own back then, watching my daughter play in the yard with her stepbrother. It's been 4 years since the courtroom. The house smells like cedar and morning coffee. Sarah, my wife now, is inside making breakfast. We met 2 years after the custody hearing, at a dinner with mutual friends, of all places. She was quiet, observant, the kind of person who noticed things. When I told her about the trial, she didn't offer sympathy. She simply nodded and said, "You did what was necessary." That's what I appreciated about her. No drama. No need to revisit the wound. My relationship with my daughter has deepened in ways I couldn't have anticipated. She's old enough now to understand, partially, what happened. She knows her mother lied in court. She knows I fought for her without fighting her mother. She knows, in the way children do, the difference between a parent who's present out of obligation and one who's present by choice. Jennifer sends emails occasionally. Not many, maybe 3 or 4 a year. They're polite and businesslike, confirming pickup times, discussing school activities, asking about medical appointments. There's no warmth in them, but there's no hostility either. We've reached a kind of détente. The two of us. We're cordial strangers now, bound by a child and by history we've both chosen to leave behind. I ran into her mother at the grocery store about 18 months ago. It was awkward at first. She was loading vegetables into her cart, and I was reaching for the same bin. We recognized each other simultaneously. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she said, "Hello." I said, "Hello." She asked about my daughter. I asked about her health. We exchanged the kind of pleasantries people make when they've shared something profound and can never quite discuss it directly. Before we parted ways, she pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. I waited until I was in my car to open it. It was a brief note written in careful handwriting. I only wish I'd spoken sooner, but I'm glad I spoke when I did. I hope your life is better now. Elizabeth, I've read that note maybe 20 times over the years. It sits in a drawer with other documents I've kept, not out of spite or documentation, but out of a kind of respect for the complexity of what happened. Elizabeth chose loyalty to truth over loyalty to blood. That's a choice that cost something. I wanted to remember that she'd made it. Catherine is a partner at her firm now. We still grab coffee occasionally, though the meetings no longer involve case files and strategy. We talk about our lives, our families, the cases she's working on. She's never said anything directly, but I think she understood what I came to understand during those years, that patience and evidence are their own kind of power, that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to fight. The courtroom feels distant now, not forgotten. I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of the gavel, or the silence that followed it, or the way Jennifer's face looked when her own mother told the truth. But distant in a way that significant moments become, real but no longer urgent, formative but no longer consuming. What remains mostly is quiet, my daughter laughing in the yard, Sarah's voice from inside the house, the ordinary rhythms of a life built on honesty rather than deception. Not perfect, not unmarked by what came before, but grounded in something solid. That morning in the courtroom feels like it happened to someone else now. Someone I needed to be, but no longer am. The victory I felt then wasn't triumph. It was release. It was a simple, profound relief of finally being believed, of having the truth, after years of careful work and restraint, finally speak louder than the lies. That, in the end, was all I'd ever wanted.